And that's very kind of it. As you can see, I dressed up this morning because competing with Mike Foster's waistcoats has always been a challenge. So I thought the best thing I can do is really dress up. I've got a few slides as well to bore you with, because I thought that some of you won't recognize me since I got rid of my dreadlocks, as you can see. So really interesting stuff that I've been researching and studying over the last couple of years. I'll share some of it, but afterwards, if you want, even in a chat or longer term, just to chat about it, I'd be delighted to, because one of my specialisms is kind of mentoring and helping people who are developing marketing teams, but also their own marketing as a whole. And I'll tell you a little bit about what I'm doing a bit later if we get time. So I'm going to try and share my screen, which never goes well, but we'll see. Can everybody see that? Hopefully you can, because I can't see myself anymore.
Can't see anything.
We can't see it at the moment.
No.
Is it on there? I'm sharing my screen. Let me just go back to Zoom. As long as you can see me, that's the important thing. Bang, here we go. Boom.
There we go. We can.
Don't look ahead. I don't want you cheating.
There we go. We can see it.
Okay, and especially for Kelly, I put there the Institute of Data and Marketing. Always important to mention data when you've got a rock star in the building. That's the important thing. So what I'd really like to talk to you about today is how marketing has moved on, but also we all, as individuals, experience the customer journey when we're buying stuff ourselves. Could be domestically as a consumer, it could be in business to business. And that's moved on a lot in the last few years. And I've been doing a lot of studying, a lot of research, and an awful lot of stuff that I can share with you. Unfortunately, I'm really into my hard copies, as I said in a breakout meeting. So I do have a certain amount that I can send you if you'd like some more research topics. And I'll obviously be setting you an essay as well. The reason I set you essays is I started out as a geography teacher, and as you can see, although my hair's changed, I've still got the jacket, which is very important to me, and it still fits, strangely enough. So think, as I go through, of what sort of stuff concerns you about marketing, but also where you think you've seen good marketing, or where you think you can up your game as well, because I'd be delighted to share ideas or just give you some ideas from different parts of the sectors that I've been looking at over the last few years. So the customer journey, some of us are relative novices to the customer journey, depending on what we're looking for, but we also carry a lot of baggage with us as we move through that customer journey. And that's one of the things that creates problems for marketers, because people have certain expectations and certain issues in their heads, like we all finding a plumber, for example. Oh my God, this is going to be a problem. This is going to be a problem. This is going to be a problem. How do I find out whether they're any good? So our customer journey starts quite often in a solution-based phase. So these are the 5 points to make a note of, because I'll keep coming back to them. So think of the client journey. We all go on them, but so do our clients. And which touch points do we interact with across that journey? And some are less or more of relative importance. And this is where data comes in again, Kelly, because actually the bigger companies like Amazon, for example, know exactly what your behavior is. I was talking to a researcher at Facebook not that long ago, and they basically said to me, well, Facebook knows more about you than your family do, certainly more than your wife does, from all the searches you do. I wasn't actually on Facebook, but I didn't want to, kill any of his issues. So touch points are important too. Then we've got the pain points and the delight points. Where's the stress? Where's the happiness? How do we get through those? And we all experience those, whether we're doing it domestically, as consumers buying on Amazon or finding something, but we also do it in B2B. How do we move forward? So it would be really useful for you guys and for all of us, and I do it quite regularly. What does the customer journey map look like to a potential client of ours? And then right at the bottom, we've got, well, who's your ideal client and how does your ideal client search and look? So they're the things that I'd like to go over. And this is what we need to do as business people and as marketers. Have you experienced the customer journey for yourself from standing in your client's shoes? Have you identified the communication touch points? If I'm finding out and I've got a particular preference for LinkedIn or for TikTok or you know, House Club and all of the other ones, how would I perceive what I'm getting from you as a brand? And don't get confused, branding is, you know, we know it's Coca-Cola, it's Lexus, it's Apple, etc., but it's all of us as well. We've all got our own individual brands. Recognizing when we go through that customer journey as one of our potential clients, where the pain points or the delight points are, is really quite important, because it was 1966, actually, a guy called Eugene Schwartz came up with this idea of marketing to mind states. There's no point marketing if people aren't in the right state of mind for that message. So what I want to emphasize today is, are you sending the right things to people at the right stage of their journey, but also their mindset? And there are some great examples, some actually a bit manipulative, of how this is being done as we speak by certain organizations. And then map out that customer journey. Sometimes it's, a straight referral comes straight to you. Why did that referral come to you? Was it through a business network like this? Was it through somebody like Mike or Ben saying you need to speak to Kelly, for example? Or it could be something more complicated than that. So what's become more and more important in digital marketing, but in marketing as a whole, is attributing the contribution of each of those touch points. And then finally, what does your ideal client persona look like? Well, obviously, if I was talking to my daughters, it has to look like Matthias Schoenertz or Brad Pitt, and also be prepared to pay. But you know, if you can't have the ideal, how close to the ideal? So put yourself in your client's shoes. And we hear this all the time, but we so rarely do it. We so rarely understand what their motivations, their issues, their worries, and their expectations are. And that's one of the things we as a small, smaller businesses need to do much more effectively. So hopefully you'll go away with much healthier takeaways than this, but things to ponder on, which you can, find me a LinkedIn and say, you mentioned this, what did you mean by that? Please feel free to ask any of those questions. So let's go back to the past. Now, none of you were around to dress like this, which is very important. And probably none of you are around to dress like this. I did actually find, this is a picture of Mike Foster's five-a-side team from the late 80s. Obviously, the kits are slightly different now. But we've moved on from the 70s and the 80s, and even the 90s, where it was sell, sell, sell. Once I've got your attention, I can do this. We don't experience that, partially because of GDPR, but for other reasons as well. So there was that whole idea that once you've got attention and interest, how do you make that person make the decision? How do you make them take action? And as we've seen from the Glengarry Glen Ross example, it's, are you closing? Now, that kind of model is a bit 80s, a bit 90s, still exists in some sectors, but doesn't really work, as we know. Why is that, I wonder? Well, none of you are around in 2009, perhaps a few of you were at kindergarten, but something major happened in June of 2009. Answers on a postcard, please, because that dates me. Answers in an email, please. What do you think happened? Well, it's a sea change in marketing as a whole, but also in the consumer world. Both business to business and business to consumer. And what happened on the 24th of June 2009 is that's when private individuals, us, the general population, not businesses, not brands, not traditional media, became the largest producers of media in the world. So the power base changed. We are now the biggest producers of media in the world. And brands took a long time to react to that, because we co-create, we can comment on things, we can find out if a brand is not behaving in the way that, they purport to. And that's when CSR started to come in, but also started to change massively to being a bit more authentic. And so brands, us, we have to be authentic now. And at our level, it's relatively easy. It's one person, it's two people, it's three people, it's a team. That's easy to monitor. But that authenticity has become a key aspect of the customer journey. So in the good old days, we had the sales funnel, the sales pipeline. We could all bore you about that. Then we moved in the digital age to something called reach, interact, the RACE framework. Reach, act, convert, engage. Have you sort of traced who you're talking to at the reach stage? Who are you trying to reach? Who are you interacting with? Who are potential clients? how are they converting and what is their value? And then how are you engaging with them long term? Is it a one-off? Will they come back to you? It's mapping that out, which is so important. And yet that's the most neglected thing I see, actually, more than anything else. It's mapping out. We say, oh, well, you know, anybody's a potential client. Well, they're not really. If everybody's a potential client, well, you should be advertising non-stop across Google. But actually, can you afford to do that? So narrow it down as much as possible. In a recent bit of research, let me just reach down to my bookshelf. This is an excellent book, The Digital Transformation by David L. Rogers from Columbia Business School. He's a good guy as well. Digital has changed everything, whether we like it or not, because that's how we all interact. So things have changed from that funnel because there are so many other things going on. And we understand that from the networks that we all share locally, regionally, and nationally. And then a really nice guy called Avinash Kaushik came out. He was working for Google at the time, the see, think, do, care scenario. So how do clients see you or customers? What are they thinking? Can we help that process? What are they then doing? And how do we look after them? And we all do that in some form or another, but we tend to do it in a less structured fashion than we think. So the context of marketing has changed. And the client customer journey, if you'll forgive my diagram, goes through these stages now. You know, what's the ideation stage? In other words, am I looking for a solution? What idea do I have in my mind? Can I help that? So people might not know they've got an issue. So for example, I used to do some consultancy work for Black & Decker. You know, people aren't buying drills, they're buying what the drill can do, the hole and the shelves and, you know, the entire weekend messed up. And then we move through, well, I'm aware that that's an issue and I need a solution, but what are the potential options for me out there? And how do I consider them? And then when I've got a short list, say, for example, it's marketing consultants, I want somebody this, and this, and they know my sector, et cetera, that's how we as individuals and as businesses need to think. So how do we bring people towards us, pull them in, if you like? And then when they are purchasing initially and they're a customer, how do we then interact so that they become advocates? And I know there are great advocates within this network, for example, because we know we've worked with certain numbers of people and we know that we can trust them and they're ethical. And everything is omni-channel now, it's always on. So to give you some idea, on the B2b customer journey, and I'll share this, so don't worry so much, how can you simplify things for people moving through and trying to make that decision? And there are lots of things going on in people's heads, and we always say people by people, et cetera, but you also need to know that those people aren't just nice and affable to work with, but they're professional enough to deliver. And that's one of the key things I've found more recently in professional services. We tended to look online for a lot of stuff, and it's slightly more difficult then to know how is that going to be delivered to us. It's a bit like, even though Amazon are absolutely brilliant at collecting our data and giving suggestions to us, if I buy a loo seat from Amazon, it's not long till they think I'm a loo seat collector. And, you know, oh, you bought a black loo seat yesterday, Mr. Kennedy. Why don't you buy these 3 plus this, plus that, plus these for a special deal? Because lots of other people bought those loo seats. So the algorithms are getting much better, but they're not necessarily as concise as they should be about my particular needs. So finding that sweet spot where your goals, you want a client and you want a client that's going to be low hassle and, you know, fairly lucrative, and aligning that with the client's goals. So to give you some idea of how complicated this can be, this is Deloitte research that I literally was sent through a couple of days ago. And, you know, 73 days, 250 touch points, looking at blogs, blah, blah, blah. And that was one lady just buying a pair of jeans. So I'd like to think they probably were ideal and fitted. I assumed she was buying for her, but you never know. Forrester research majors on something called customer experience. And this is something we tend not to think about in business to business, but has become more and more important. And I divide that into 3 areas. And this is one of the areas I think you should really think about, because it's really helped me in helping a particular business I'm working with at the moment move things forward. So it's known as the baseline, the curve, and the punch. And that's how Forrester Research divides up the nature of the customer journey. So the baseline, we all start from a different baseline in terms of expectations, in terms of past experiences, in terms of thinking what we want. Do we really know, and are we communicating in the right way to really focus that baseline or where the client starts? So their current level of understanding, their expectations, their previous experiences. We all start from different baselines. And that's where business to business quite often falls down, because we just assume, well, everybody's looking at this stage, they want this, they want a document about this. And actually that might not be the trigger that really makes a difference to them. The curve is the process as they go through that journey. And it's called the curve because obviously there are different elements within it. And how can you influence that curve? What particular piece of information or interaction could help that process? And then the punch, I need the final outcome. Sometimes we say, they're a client, fantastic. But actually sometimes we judge that too early, and we need to sort of look back and say, well, they're quite keen, but has the relationship soured? Are they disappointed? So I might have done all my research, I've had something delivered, but actually it was left out in the rain or whatever. So although the initial journey and the feedback given was great, I'm actually now disappointed, or it was the wrong thing. So don't judge the punch too early. So baseline, curve, and punch, even if you just got that written down, think about that from how you deliver through the customer journey. And in more recent research, particularly in Harvard Business Review, I've been really fascinated by this idea of frictionless versus memorable. So we've got some frictionless brands and operations which we know need to be frictionless. We just want it to be low hassle and done, and we expect it. A bit like the IT department, we only care when it goes wrong. And then at the other end of the spectrum, we've got memorable, the experience, what was it like? And we're all somewhere along that spectrum. We want something unbelievably efficient, and that's what sort of Ryanair, McDonald's, Uber, Amazon have done extremely well. At the other end, we want something to be incredibly memorable. And even if there's some hassle with that, like a queue at Disneyland or whatever, that's part of the experience and it's built in. So think about that in terms of, and this is great actually for when you're shopping as well, and when you're doing online stuff, think about how often you abandon a basket. Because in lockdown, for example, people were opening mail much more frequently than they used to. So an enormous number of companies were starting to do mailers based on the abandoned basket information of online retailers. So suddenly I think, I don't want that loo seat now. And wow, what comes through the door? A mailer 3 days later saying, are you still interested in a loo seat? You still, is your bum still sore? But et cetera, et cetera. That wasn't the actual example, but I still like that one. And then attributing each of those touch points to the contribution it made. Why did you come to me? Oh, well, I heard you were great. It probably isn't as detailed as that, because we can get very egotistical, particularly we men, about how great we are, and try and attribute which part of the process was the most important or is the most important for that client, because we all tend to think we act in the same way. Marketing, after all, is about markets, but we're not always rational. We don't always make rational decisions. And so the complicated slide, because it's very important to have a complicated slide. I should have made everything a lot smaller so you couldn't read it as well, because of my legal law firm background. But think about the things that you could do to create an opportunity for you, for the way you market yourself. So it could be access, engage, customize, connect, collaborate. They're the kind of 5 options we often talk about. So can you be faster and easier, always on, 24/7? Probably we are a lot of the time. Engaging, and this is where Mike is particularly good, if you don't mind me saying so, Mike, become a source of valued content. Well, everything Mike shares has been of value to me, particularly the stuff on LinkedIn. Can you customize? Can you adapt it specifically to customer needs? We always say that, but in the end, is it the same old stuff? that's being done? I think quite often it is, to be honest. And then connection, be part of the conversation. One of the things I was thinking about how the growth of this network is the co-creation elements. Are there opportunities now to co-create? Most brands are hoping that they'll have lots and lots of influencers who are cheap and they can co-create with them, because that creates, you've got a brand advocate, social proofing as it's known. And then collaborate, help customers build your network. Oh, now I've always been sort of an advocate of that, but I've become more cynical, because quite often one helps people build their network, and quite often you think, I didn't get much back. And I've noticed that more and more. Probably I'm just getting cynical, but I think seeing an opportunity for someone else is very, very powerful. And thinking about customize, when I was going through car park the other day, I saw Mike Foster's car, and I thought, well, there's a good example of customization. And I know you had a few issues with your car not that long ago, Mike, so I don't see why. I mean, it looks perfectly normal to me. And then the final thing I'd like to just, in terms of those specific areas which we neglect, do as detailed a customer persona as you possibly can, because it makes a big difference if you really understand and sit down and talk to clients, or brainstorm who the potential client is, what would they need, what would their issues might be, and even down to age, sex structure, what age group are they, etc., etc. This is done all the time, and you've probably, my advertising agency background, I shouldn't really admit this, it's a bit like being at Alcoholics Anonymous. We used to have cardboard cutouts of ideal personas in the business meetings with us when we met clients, to say, well, Corey is your main client, and that's because, and a cardboard cutout of Corey would come to the meetings and come to pitches with clients, which is a bit sad, really. So getting back to the key points, think about your journey and the customer journey that your clients experience or might experience, and which touch points are they using? Where might it be hard work for them, or where might actually they gain some delight? Delight's probably a strong thing in business to business, but I've noticed working with the firm I'm doing some work with now, they were basically a bog standard sort of boutique finance firm, and pivoting them into other areas has been difficult, but very, very successful, because ethical finance, green finance, ESG finance is quite a tricky area. And then map that journey. What do people want? Is it, oh my God, it's responsive, or is it, I've been looking for this over a long period of time, I need something? How am I researching? How am I looking? How do people find you? And so map that out, because it's really quite important. And then lock that into the ideal persona. There is an ideal persona out there who will be delighted to become your client. And I'll sum up with what I've always found to be very powerful, which are the 5 superpowers of marketing. And I can send you the Harvard Business Review article about this. And it's really important to think like this. So I managed to find 5 superheroes as well. So listen to the marketplace, what's going on, what's current, because again, that's useful information to share, and try and be part of the conversation. That's the important thing. If you can grow your brand when you're not actually there, that's quite important. And then put this one in for Kelly. It was in anyway, Kelly, but I thought you needed it. Leap piles of data in a single barrel. Use the data that you're collecting. Use and I don't mean necessarily super cray computer crunching data. I mean, what's the feedback you've had? 3, 4, 5 bits of feedback. It could be really basic stuff, but it's really important, because that data is value. And that data could be comments, it could be what's happening, social proofing, etc. The other one, which is a particular bugbear of mine, because I've always experienced it when I've come in and tried to set up marketing teams in professional services, it's people don't want to talk to each other and they don't want to share. And that's in the smallest companies. So try and break down those silos, because silos always exist. And in the bigger organizations, they're almost deliberate fiefdoms. And the other one I really like, and this is something that this network does really well, and what we should all try and do, is bring out those superpowers in others. What are other people really good at? Give them the chance to be good at it. Finally, so those are the key points. Experience the customer journey for yourself. Think about those touch points. Are there pain points or delight points? Try and get the mix to be right. Pain points aren't always a problem because sometimes they can be an opportunity. And then visualize that customer journey map and then think about that client persona and what they actually look like and what they experience. Thanks very much.